Ohne dich ist das nur eine VR-Brille. Mit dir ist das...
Ohne dich sind Elektronikprodukte einfach nur Geräte. Mach mehr daraus und bewirb dich jetzt für eine Ausbildung beim Mediamarkt. Mehr Infos gibt's auf mediamarkt.de/ohne-dich.
Hauptsache, ihr habt Spaß. Mediamarkt.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good morning and happy Tuesday. Did I say Tuesday? I mean, happy Monday. Well, I was just checking to see if you were listening. Yeah, this is Dr. Hank, and welcome to the Dr. Hank Show. It's the show about emotional intelligence and everything else that can be remotely associated with emotional intelligence. And you might ask the question, well, what would that be? Well, just about anything that you can imagine. It's all related to emotional intelligence. As a matter of fact, Today, our guest is going to be Pamela McCoy, and Pamela is a regular on the show. And she's going to be sharing with us about financial capability and personal money management. Now, on the surface, you may think, well, what does that got to do with emotional intelligence? Well, let me tell you, we are coming up on tax season. As a matter of fact, we're into tax season, and almost nothing generates emotions like tax and preparing our tax and submitting our tax and whether we're going to get a refund or what happens. So that's an emotional issue for most people, because what we're talking about is something called emotional regulation. And so we'll get into that a little bit later when Pamela is on board. And she'll be with us in just about 7 or 8 minutes. So you have time to heat your lunch or grab your lunch or heat your coffee if you're just getting up first thing in the morning to do that. So if you're just getting up and you're heating your coffee and everything, you're getting ready for the show, good. I'm glad you're here with us. Let me tell you about a couple of things that just went on this past weekend and some of the things that's coming up. And one, I'd like to say congratulations to Kelly Ford, Bronwyn Hoffman, and Mark Montoya. They went through the EQI 2.0 certification, which was held in Orlando this weekend. Actually, it was Friday and Saturday. So I'd like to say congratulations to them for completing that. And that certification is going to be offered again in April, and it'll be in Orlando again. So it's April 13 and 14, so that's just around tax season, around tax time, so we'll be talking more about that. But, yeah, if you haven't registered for the EQI 2.0 certification, you still have time to do that. We're just beginning to open up to take registrations for that certification. Again, it's going to be in Orlando, Florida, and it is April 13 and April 14. So, again, a big shout-out to Kelly, Braun, and Mark for successfully completing the certification this past weekend. Okay? So, thanks to all of those. And for those of you that are just tuning in and you're listening to Let's Talk EI or the Dr. Hank Show for the very first time, Let me just tell you a little bit about the show and why we have the show. The show is really brought to you by the Society of Emotional Intelligence. Now, the Society of Emotional Intelligence is the only professional association dedicated to helping people develop and understand more about emotional intelligence. So if you're not a member of that organization, just Google it. Google Society of Emotional Intelligence, and you'll come upon some of the chapters. We have chapters in New York, in Chicago, and we have 4 of them in Florida. We also have Atlanta, Ohio, and a few others. We even stepped outside of the U.S. We have one in the U.K. So if you're interested in being a member, just go to the website, societyofei.org, go to the membership page, and follow the directions and all that, which will get you into becoming a member. Also, if you're interested in starting a chapter of the Society of Emotional Intelligence, because there's not one where you are, let's say that you live in Cleveland, Ohio, and you're interested in having a chapter in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, send me an email. Send an email to the Dr. Hank Show and say, hey, I'd like to get a chapter started in Cleveland, Ohio, and we'd be glad. We'd be more than happy to kind of share with you the ifs and buts and wins and whys and all of that, which will get you set up to get a chapter going in Cleveland. Now, I just mentioned Cleveland. Hey, Cleveland may not be interested in starting a chapter, but I just wanted to use that as a way of saying, hey, if you want to get a chapter started in your general area and there's not one, we'll be more than happy to work with you. So again, welcome to the show. This is the Dr. Hank Show, and today we're going to be focusing on tax season, and I'm going to throw in that other part, and that is emotional regulation, because we all get excited when we're talking about taxes. So here's an opportunity to find out from someone who knows all about financial management. That is Pamela McCoy. So good morning, Pamela. Are you there?
I am here, Dr. Hank. How are you today?
Fantastic. Excited to hear what you're going to share with our listeners today. I was telling them about very few things get people's adrenaline flowing like taxes, so, they say there's 2 things that you can count on, and that's taxes and death, or death and taxes, something like that. So,
yeah, that's what they say.
I guess it's a pretty important topic then. So thank you for agreeing to be a part of the show. And I shared with our listeners that you're a regular now, and I'd like to consider you as such. Being a regular, it just means that we want you to be back more often to kind of share your skills and knowledge with our listeners, because this is really an important topic. And not so much just because it's tax season, but because it's about money. And people, people get some people get excited about it, some people get uptight about it. But whatever the case is, there is usually some emotional reaction around money. So you're going to help us, one, look at it from the hard part, and I say the hard part, and that is taking a look at how you can be a better manager of money. And I'm going to help out with throwing that emotional part in there in terms of talking about maybe some of the things that we can do on the emotional side to be able to deal with some of those issues. So let's jump right in and get started. Again, I'm going to ask you to just tell a little bit about yourself, so that some people might be tuning in for the very first time, and I don't want them to go, well, we don't know who she is. So tell us a little bit about Pamela.
Well, I am the CEO of Bonafide Credit Consultants, LLC. We're based out of Tampa, Florida, but we have clients all over. And our main focus, so we have expertise in over 30 years experience in the credit industry, to include banking and all things credit card and credit. We choose to focus on personal money management and financial capability education. So we do workshops, seminars, as well as one-on-one consultations. How we typically function, entities will hire us to come in, and we provide customized workshops for their constituents. So our client base has included churches. It's included educational institutions from, I've done elementary schools, I've done secondary education. So I've done, college students, and that would include the students as well as the staff. We have done employers, employees. It really doesn't matter when you're talking about personal money management. And I always have to throw in the caveat or the clarifying statement that what we do is very different than what a financial advisor does. To kind of keep it in simple terms, a financial advisor's role is to manage the money that's taken off the top, i.e., your 401k, your investment piece of the money. Our role at Bonafide Credit Consultants is to help you manage the money that you keep, what you're taking home each week. And so in our workshops, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about a financial advisor, but only from the perspective of how to choose one, what their role is, why they're important. We'll talk about investments only from the perspective of why it's important to diversify. We won't dive into the weeds as to what you should choose with regards to mutual funds or, big cap, small cap, all that kind of stuff. That's the role of a financial advisor, to get into that, what you should be into for your future, for your retirement, what your ratio should be, should you be, this percentage in stocks and bonds and that kind of thing. That's based on your financial picture from what you want your retirement to look like, as well as what is your time horizon for that retirement. Are you 30 today and looking at retiring at 50? Are you 50 today looking at retiring at 60, or is it 75? All those kind of things dictate what your portfolio should look like, i.e., what you should be invested in right now. So we don't get into that in my workshops. I'm talking about the money that you're taking home, how you're doing your grocery list, how you're, buying clothes for your kids to go to school, how you're doing your spending plan, that kind of thing, how you're preparing for Christmas. That's what we do.
You focus on the now money, so to speak, versus the money of tomorrow.
On the future money.
Right.
But both are very important.
Oh, absolutely. Both are important, but most people live from, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, and I'll probably get all kinds of calls and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. But if I say most people live from paycheck to paycheck, I'm just saying it from the standpoint of most people live out of the money that they make. Yeah, they set money aside and they invest and things like that. They don't really have to, on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis, worry about that part of their money. But they do have to worry about Monday through Friday's money and next week's money. Those are the ones that it sounds like you're talking about. You help people to get a better handle on. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And when you're saying that people are living paycheck to paycheck, you're hitting the nail right on the head. I mean, the statistics are staggering as it relates to the number of people that are literally living paycheck to paycheck. It is like 50%. 50% are living paycheck to paycheck. There is, I think the statistic was about 3%, have an emergency fund, and that percentage that would even have $500, set aside for something that could come up unexpectedly. It is staggering, the statistics. And so that is my role, is to try to help people prepare for that. And, I recently, at the end of last year, was on one of our local stations, and we did a segment right after, Hurricane Irma came through, and it was really just heartbreaking to hear some of the Facebook posts and as it relates to people and their family members who were outside of Florida, oh, get out, get out, get out. And some of them basically were just saying, quit telling me to leave. I want to leave. I feel like I should leave.
I can't afford to leave.
But I can't afford, like, financially, that's not an option for me. And so for you to keep telling me that is just adding to my stress because it's just not something that I can do. So how about you just quit telling me that? And worse than that, how about you're not in a financial position to help me?
Oh,
and so
my
that's
gosh,
what we do at Bonafide, that generational transfer. We spend quite a bit of time talking about that, that in your circle, they can't help you. And so we had Floridians that were stuck to come what may because of their finances.
And I had said, paycheck to paycheck. I'm going to take it one step further, just for the sake of this discussion. If I say from paycheck to paycheck, that assumes that the person gets a paycheck and then they spend. There are a lot of us, and I'm going to put myself into that group, that spend prior to the paycheck. And so we're not living paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes we're living prior to paycheck.
Beyond their means, and some are just, they don't have a choice. They are trying to make ends meet, doing the best they have with what they have to work with. And so, it's a strange philosophy, and I know you do a lot with the EI and all of that, and it really is. It's all tied together. And the way people think, feel, and believe about money has a lot to do with their upbringing. And those things that were environmental, that it wasn't a conversation we sat down, this is what we think about money. It wasn't that. It's just what they observed and what actually transacted around them about money. For example, I did here in Tampa, we do around Martin Luther King, they have what is called, there's some grant funding around Martin Luther King Day of Service. And so nonprofits have funding, and for-profit companies such as mine, we partner with them and we do things in the community supporting his philosophies on things. And so, of course, financial literacy and economics and all that was, of course, part of his philosophy. So I partnered with a nonprofit, and we were working with young girls, 8-year-old to 11-year-old, and they were from, a certain demographic, economically impacted most adversely. And we were talking, of course, about money and income and all. So I asked the question about income. What is income? And one little girl raises her hand, and do you know what her answer was to me, what income is? The money that you get from the government. Not a job.
Oh.
The money you get from the government.
But that's
her world.
That's her world. That's her world. And she's heard that from, those around her, whether they were parents or relatives or whatever. That is where income comes from for that group or her and her family or whatever. Yeah, that's income. And that's the only source of income.
That's why it's important that we do, we change that mindset, we shift that mindset, and it's not that it's wrong, that's her world, but we need to make sure, and that's why what we did that day was so important, that we expose them and let them know that there are things outside of that world, and, you do well in school, you get exposed to these other things. Like, you can do more, be more, give more, contribute more, and it all ties back to education.
Right.
So how about
and thank you for sharing that, because we don't want our listeners to go away thinking, feeling that because they don't have the skills and knowledge in terms of money management that, they're a lost cause, or that they are not worthy individuals. No, it's just that sometimes we don't as the saying goes, if I knew better, I'd do better.
I'd do better.
So
Exactly.
what we're talking
you don't
about
know what
is
you don't know.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about is giving the choice. Now that I know, I can make a choice.
Yes, a wise man once said, who's near and dear to my heart, know what you know what you don't know, but know who knows what you don't know, and that's who you need to know.
Oh, my gosh. You're going to have to send me that one, Pamela.
And that's just powerful.
I like that one.
Because that's exactly what you're saying. You don't know everything, but when you know that I don't know this thing, then you set on this mission to find the person who knows this thing that you don't know. That's who you need to know so that you can learn it.
Yes.
And it's okay not to know. You know, if your parents didn't know, or your grandparents or whoever was in your world and in your circle, if they didn't know, they couldn't teach you. Doesn't mean they didn't love you. Doesn't mean they didn't do the best they could do. It just meant they didn't know. And they loved you enough, you have to know that if they knew, they would have taught you. They would have shared that with you.
Absolutely.
They just didn't know.
That
and so
is so
it's
powerful.
okay. But now that you know that it's something that you need to know, how about sign up for one of my workshops or someone to get to know that knowledge, you know, so that generationally, that's one of my missions, that generational transfer. So it doesn't matter what age you get it. It's just important that you get it. So if you don't get it until you're 40 or 50, all that means is the time horizon that you can benefit from the knowledge is shorter than if you'd gotten it at 15 or 20. But if you still get it at 40, 50, or 60, and you teach it to your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, generationally, they got it at 15 or 20. So for their entire adult lifetime, they benefit from that knowledge. What a powerful legacy that you gave them. So even though you didn't get the full gift, you gave that full gift to your family, to the next generation. And so, you know, legacy, that's important. That's powerful.
You know, we could do this all day long, you know, and in the sharing, what you're doing is sharing, you know, beyond what we have on the agenda to talk about today. But it's so powerful because I'm going, wow, you know, because earlier you mentioned, you know, you'd done some stuff with elementary school, and people may laugh and they go, elementary school, what do they know? You know, but it's not too early to start, and you don't have to share the same terminology with an elementary.
It's customized, and so you meet them where they're at.
Absolutely. You know, we say that to people so often, and that is, you do have to meet people where they are. That's the only way that you can reach them. You meet them where they are, then you take them where they need to be or where you feel they should be or where they want to go and so forth and so on. But you have to start where they are. Very powerful, very powerful. Well, let's jump into our topic today, and that is around the tax season. And, you know, all the stuff that's been going on here lately, you know, the tax season this year may be somewhat different from the tax season last year, but let's just think about it from this standpoint. You know, we got through the holidays. You know, and we know that most people have a burden from the holidays, so we're not going to talk about that burden that we brought with us from the holidays. And we're into the new year. So what's next on the financial radar?
It really is. It's tax season. So hopefully those who did bring a little something from the holidays into the new year, they've got a plan in place to address that. You know, and with addressing that they brought in, another plan to prevent having to carry something over to 2019. So they're going to have a plan in place to have funding aside and prepared for the holidays for 2018. So when 2018 holiday is over, it's over, you know. So that would be my little bona fide bit for that topic, just, you know, to have a plan in place for 2018 that when, you know, December 31 is on and we cheers into 2019, the holiday is truly behind us. You know, period, end of sentence.
We are going to revisit that, and I want to revisit that maybe around and I'm just using the term like mid-year, that we can go back and
Yes,
talk
I
about
would
now that
love
the year
to.
is halfway over.
Yes,
Let's
let's
start
prepare.
making sure that we don't. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Let's prepare so that at the end of the year we're not carrying too much stuff over. But
Mhm.
anyway, so what's next on the financial radar is to be able to deal with this thing called taxes.
Taxes.
So, what are some of the
Yeah, and
things that a taxpayer should consider when choosing? Well, even before we get to a tax preparer, what is it?
well, it
What do we want to
for
talk about when we talk about taxes?
well, this year we started. They actually began on the 29th of January. You could begin to file, although they won't start processing, until like February. You could have
Hmm.
began actually filing, and in preparation, again, having a system in place, a checklist. If you have a tax preparer, hopefully they've got a checklist for you that they provided beforehand of things that they need you to bring and have available, because it just makes the process so much easier. And some of
Right,
those things,
right.
a lot of receipts and your tax returns from the previous year. If they weren't your tax preparer, if they were your preparer last year, then they probably have, your taxes from last year on file
Hmm.
somewhere. But of course, your W-2s, if you, depending on if you're consulting or whatever, 1099s you might have, all of those income-driven kinds of things, expense things, if you're homeowner, things related to your home, your mortgage, insurances, premiums, all those kinds of things they need, things that might be deductible for you. If you are a business owner, you've got um, things that they need related to your business. And again, depending on how you're filing, your sole proprietor or your LLC, S corp, all those kind of things, are they filed together or separate as it relates to your personal taxes? And again, your tax preparer, your accountant, CPA, or whomever, they're giving you guidance prior to, hopefully. But if not,
Right,
again,
right.
don't beat yourself up if you're not where you need to be. Don't be fearful that you're not asking the questions. When you know better, you do better. You got to get started doing the right thing at some point. So ask the questions. Do your research and your due diligence as to where you're supposed to be in terms of your setup if you're a small business or what have you. Or
Hmm.
just related to your personal taxes. Are you itemizing or not itemizing? Are you filing joint? Are you filing, all those kind of things. What's in your best interest in terms of outcomes of your filing of your taxes? And again, as you mentioned, Dr. Hank, 2017 is kind of like the last of the last, because 2018 is a whole new ball game. And honestly, we really don't know what it looks like, feels like, it's going to be like.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
hearing.
so we need to get this 2017 taxes behind us. And again, there's going to be a lot of questions from a lot of us starting next year. And so, once we get this behind us, then certainly for this year, you need to keep receipts for everything. When in doubt, keep it, because we don't really know what it's going to be like.
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, so if you're thinking you might be able to deduct it, or you thought you did last year and you can't this year, whenever in doubt, just keep it. And I'm a
Yeah.
strong
Yeah.
proponent for scanning stuff as opposed to keeping the paper, because paper gets lost and misplaced, and then you need it, you can't find it, all of that. So I'm a strong proponent for scanning, just because
Okay.
it's electronic and it's there. You can always query, your email or wherever you scan the document to retrieve it, versus
Hmm.
trying to look in a pile here, a folder here, or
That's a
box
good
here,
idea.
or whatever, for a piece of paper that might be a huge difference in terms of cash for you. As it relates to
That's
your, if I
right.
could just find, because you definitely, when it comes to taxes, you don't want to get in a situation where you claim something or put something on there and you can't back it up with documentation, because as
Yeah.
sure as you do it, it'll be the one time that an audit or a question will come up, and then you don't have the documentation. You certainly don't want to go down that path,
Yes.
of
Yes.
not being able to prove or, document what was said in the taxes. So
Gotcha.
scan,
Gotcha.
just scan. But certainly, have the questions, because 2018, like I said, is going to be a whole new ball of wax. But as it relates to choosing a tax preparer, there's just questions that you need to ask. If you have this person, or even if it's a person that you've used in the past, how did you choose the person? It might have been word of mouth, or just default, or just I was in a crunch and this person appeared and so I used them. But again, as more focus is going on taxes, we're not really sure what kind of scrutiny that's going to bring. So we just really need to be more cognizant of, what we're doing. So you need to make sure you're checking their qualifications, their credentials, to make sure, because you want to be sure that you have, a fallback. If something goes wrong, you need to make sure the person that you put your eggs in that basket, their credentials are where they need to be, because that's how you're going to stay in the clear.
And that's a really, really good point, because what I'm thinking about, during this time of year, you have a lot of people out there, and I would assume that most of them are legitimate. So I'm not talking about whether they're legitimate or not. I'm just talking about from the standpoint, you have a lot of people that say they do tax preparation, and and all the way from the HR blog to, the folks that you see in Walmart, to the folks that you see with a crown on their head and waving a sign as you're driving along the freeway, to the ones that are in the supermarket sometimes, So how do you know? Or do you have to say, based on what I've heard and seen and whatever, I've convinced myself that I'm going to go with this individual? In other words, emotionally, I've decided they satisfy what I was looking for.
Well, just like, with a financial advisor, they have FINRA. And even though there's a lot of information on the internet about, that you can, when you're Googling various tax questions or what have you, I always say go to the source. And the source is irs.gov, because the government, this is their tax code. They're the ones who are making the rules, writing the code, all of that. So always go to the source, and so you're quoting the source. These are your rules. This is what you said. This is where I went to find the answer to this question. And they do have what's called the IRS Directory of Federal Tax Return Preparers with credentials. So that's a source to find out. And it also says on that source that tax preparers, when they prepare your taxes, they should put their PTIN on there, and that stands for Preparer's Tax Identification Number.
Okay. Now we're getting there. Yes.
It says, by law, paid preparers must sign returns and include their PTIN. That's directly from the source. That's from irs.gov. It says all paid tax preparers must have a preparer tax identification, and by law, paid preparers must sign returns and include their PTIN number. So, of course, if somebody's kitchen and they're filling them out, they may not have a PTIN number.
Yeah. That's important. That's sort of like one of the things that whether they are approved by the IRS at that point.
Correct.
Because they're supposed to have that PTIN number. Now, there are a lot of people that will just go ahead and do your taxes and things like that may not be approved by the IRS. And for people who take that risk, and I say risk, but for people who do that, they should just be aware that that individual is not approved by the IRS, which is good to know, but
and they just need to go in with the eyes wide open, that it is a risk, and everything that's Free is not always free, but, again,
Yeah.
I'm just here to disseminate information, and people choose as they will,
Right.
And again, like anything else, you don't ever, ever, ever sign a blank return. I've heard of people, oh, my friend, they're going to fill it out, and I'm not going to be able to get back over there, next week, so I'm going to go ahead and sign it, and they're going to fill it out and send it in. That's another no-no. I've heard people doing that, word of caution, not always the best thing.
Never sign a blank return, meaning that the preparer's name and everything should be on there?
Right. Well, it should be filled out. Like all your numbers and stuff should be on there.
Right.
It should be completed when you're signing it, that
Gotcha.
you've reviewed it. Because basically you're saying, I reviewed it and I'm okay with the numbers or what have you. And some people, it's inconvenient. My schedule's so busy. I trust you, so I'm going to go ahead and sign it today. You're going to finish it next week and send it in, but I'm going to be out of town. I can't get with you. So I'm going to go ahead and sign it today. You fill it out and blah, 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 and mail it in. That's another,
don't
just
do
a word of caution.
Don't
and,
do
that
that.
you always know up front what the service fees are and ask about e-filing and, records and receipts and all of those kind of just cautionary things.
Yeah. So what if a person cannot afford a tax preparer? I mean, and I'm going to just use this as a way of getting into it. Some people are on limited budgets, limited income, or they cannot, afford to spend that, $250 or $75, whatever it is that the preparer charges. What alternative do they have?
Well, there are a few programs that exist. One is a VITA program, and these are national programs, so it's not a Florida thing. They're national programs, so they can, again, if they go to the IRS.gov website, they can key in free tax prep, and it will give them, they can key in then from there their zip codes or what have you to find organizations in their area. But VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, and some of these programs do have income requirements. So it's not just a matter of, I don't have $250 laying around. It's an income break, and typically it's like the $58,000 a year or less qualifies you for free tax preparation. There may be some exceptions in your area. So, again, my philosophy is always I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell me no. So if you really are having some financial distress or what have you, ask the question. If I'm making $59,000 or $60,000, I'm close, but I'm over, I'm going to ask the question. Maybe there's something else you can do. If nothing else, maybe there's someone there who outside of the program, but you have a heart for people and will just let me come down and sit with you and you help walk me through it or whatever. I don't know. Just ask the question. People are willing to help sometimes if you just ask the question. And then, of course, senior citizens, if you're 60 years old or older, VITA might work for you, but there's also another program called the Tax Counseling for the Elderly. And, again, that's a national program. The same thing. You can either Google TCE or go through the IRS.gov to find those in your area. And sometimes they even offered, at senior centers or what have you. And though they typically are very active during the tax season, the January through April, the TCE programs have events and things going on throughout the year, kind of preparing and helping seniors get ready, for the tax season. So, again, even if grandchildren and children, maybe you want to check into those programs for your parents or grandparents and kind of help them along, so it's not stressful for them during this tax season or what have you.
Tax counseling for the elderly. Okay.
Tax counseling for the elderly. So those are just some things that they can look into if, again, they're mostly income driven. But also outside of these programs, look in your local areas, libraries and sometimes church organizations or nonprofits sometimes run programs, CPAs or accountants or what have you, might run some programs, tax assistance workshop seminars or whatever that might be free or very nominal to help people, either prepare their taxes or Q&A sessions, all kinds of things. So again, just don't wait until last minute. Now's the time, January, because, you have until, April, but you don't want to wait until, April 10th, 12th, I need somebody to help me with my taxes. So now is the time to start trying to figure out where you might get assistance if that's something that's needed. And then again, certainly, once you get this year behind you, I cannot stress enough, taxes for 2018, you need to have a plan in place long before the tax season starts, because when I say everybody's going to be scrambling, so even if you are the person who typically files your taxes yourself, or you you do TurboTax or Intuit or whatever to do it yourself, even those people will be scrambling, because it's already been said. I was at a workshop just last week a CPA was conducting, and she was so cautionary about tax season 2018. She said she already put her clients on notice that she is not going to file electronically for any of her clients in 2018. She's going to manually file for all of her clients in 2018 because she's not confident that the systems are going to work. That whole YCK thing, because when you think about it, everything is changing. All the TurboTax. First, the government has to get it fixed and right, and change all the manuals and forms, and all that stuff has to be done and printed and all that kind of stuff. And then they have to pass that information along to all these third parties, Intuit, TurboTax, and all that, for them to do the programming for their own third party systems. How many bugs and kinks, and it's not a whole lot of time to try to get it right, beta testing and all that, because that's a lot of changing that has to happen, and you got to get through this tax season before you can even do that. So you're talking we didn't start even doing that till like May, June.
Yeah, because I was hearing that the federal government itself not quite sure of what goes where and how it's going to be laid out, and so they're scrambling, trying to do their part so that they can roll it out. So And
already before all of this, they had shortages in terms of resources on the tax side, in the IRS. So who's going to do all this stuff?
Well,
so it's a lot that needs to happen, and even in the best case scenario, utopia, changing technology, flipping things over, there's going to be bugs and kinks, and should the system crash, then what? We have problems with people getting refunds and stuff done right now when, the system's kind of, this is the same system we've had, and it's not perfect, and that's just the way it is. And so when you change everything from the forms to the manual to the interpretation of the code, because again, now when there's a question about, is this truly, a deductible or whatever, you could reference back to something. Well, 2018, you can't reference back to nothing because this is a new code.
Because it will not have existed, new codes.
Right. So now you might even have to, get in the legal system for someone to interpret what we meant when we said this statement. What does that really mean?
Well, that's going to happen.
Exactly. So how long does that take? Well, what happens to these people who this one statement, this one line impacts? Does everyone go on hold? Do you go ahead and process it this way and then, refund people later if it was wrong, or ask for your money back, Uncle Sam, if it was it's just so many unanswered questions. I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but this is the quandary that will happen.
There will be questions. There will be questions. You don't know the answers, but there will be questions. Now back to this year. Why is the tax deadline different this year as opposed to maybe last year or some of the years in the past?
Well, because April 15th falls on a Sunday, which has happened before, but different this year. Emancipation Day, which is a legal holiday in the District of Columbia, is observed on that Monday. And so because we as a nation, we respect that, and under the law, that legal holiday in District of Columbia is what's affecting it. And so that's why this year we have until April 17th, actually.
Well, because I was going to say, usually we would just say if the 15th falls on a Saturday or Sunday, it's the following Monday. But there's the Emancipation Day that is celebrated in District of Columbia. And because that's where the IRS home is, so to speak, I guess, since it's being celebrated there. But, well, I won't get into that one. But because I was going to say, it's not celebrated everywhere across the U.S., so.
Right. It's a legal holiday there. And so we are honoring that observation. So
well, it just gives us another day, so.
Right, but and it's always a catch-22.
This case, we can look a gift horse in the mouth and let it be okay.
But we shouldn't, because again, that one more day just means one more day, and then you miss that one more day, and so really, I just think just focus on April 15th, like it's always been, because then next year you say, oh, well, I thought they moved it to the 17th. No, that was just last year. You know what I mean? And so I think people just need to focus on April 15th is the day, always is the day, right. and don't lose sight of that, because when you keep changing and flipping the recipe, the soup gets too salty or whatever the little saying is or whatever. So just, focus on what it always is and just keep that there. You'll always be good.
April 15th is the day. Whether they extended one more day or not, don't even get into that. Just
don't even get into that.
Yes. Yes. Well, we were talking about earlier. We were talking about keeping documents and receipts and things. So, how long should we keep our old tax returns anyway? I mean, is there some general rule of thumb around that? Because I have them stacked up.
Going back to the source, the IRS.gov, it says at least 3 years. But I'm an advocate. 5 is kind of always a good number for me, so 5. But IRS.gov does say at least. It doesn't say 3 years. It just says at least 3 years. So, just kind of take that as your guide. At least 3 years.
Wow, because I know that and I'll say it this way: in my garage, I probably have something that goes back 10 years.
Exactly.
So
and some other things are like 7 years and all of that, and so not necessarily your taxes, but other things say 7 years. So, but IRS is at least 3, so it's whatever you're comfortable with after the 3. So at a minimum 3.
Yeah, at a minimum 3. So I think that rule of thumb of yours is pretty good. 5 sounds like a good number. So each year. Like I tell folks when they're going to buy new shoes, whatever, when the new shoes come in and a pair of old shoes go out. So in this case, we file this year and everything, then we can, and if I say shred the previous, like 5 years prior or something.
Years, right.
But that's another point, and I know that wasn't on our agenda to talk about, but, when you say how long should we keep them, that's one thing, but how should we destroy them, or how should we manage them when we want to destroy them? And I say shred, but that's just a thought. What's your thought on that?
It absolutely should be shredded, and not just the cross shred. I'm into that micro shred. I mean, it needs to be devoured. Tax records have so much of NPI, non-public information, that is crucial for identity theft. I mean, a criminal could just, do so many bad things with the information that's used in tax preparation. I mean, from your social to income and jobs that you've had, and, credit information, and just, there's so much when you think about filing your taxes, what all goes into that preparation. It absolutely needs to be devoured. And when you're saying destroy, scanning, I'm a proponent for the scanning and all of that, just to get rid of the paper being around. But even in that, your recycle bin on your laptop, it needs to be devoured on your electronically as well. I mean, it just cannot be retrieved, because it can be detrimental to your identity for a fraudster to get their hands on it. So, guard it with your life.
Yeah. So you said,
throw it in the trash and say, I'm done. You got to.
Don't just tear it up like some people, they just, tear it up into 3 or 4 pieces. They feel, well, I tore it up, and, based on what I'm hearing you say, you like to micro shred. That is
exactly
to the fine
and those micro
dust.
shredders, I mean, you can get them at Walmart, Target. I mean, they're really not that expensive, relatively speaking. And if you even just for a moment think about what it would cost you to try to recover from identity theft, the thousands of dollars in time, effort, and energy, that $50 to $100 that you would spend on a micro shredder, is a gift to yourself.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because, that little investment on that shredder compared to the hours and sometimes the dollars that it takes to get your credit straightened out again, or to recover from, I had an associate that was telling me about how long it took him to get everything right again from identity theft. It was several years, and of course several thousands of dollars that he was investing with, different companies, whatever, to recover things of identity theft. So to spend $100 or so for a shredder, I think I'd much rather do that than to have the documents and stuff laying around somewhere for someone to get. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like our time is almost over for the day, and particularly in dealing with this, emotional subject matter here. Any last thoughts or words of wisdom before we close out?
Well, I would just refer people to page 54 in my book. So if you have not gotten it yet, you can pick it up via my website at www.bonafidecc.com. And it's about your attitude, and attitude is contagious. And so the question just is yours worth catching? And I know, some of the things we talked about today as it relates to, taxes and how it can just, it could really kind of get you going and get you in a funk and, make you feel a certain kind of way. So just kind of keeping your attitude in check, and so it goes on to say, from the financial application, upon making the decision to move forward to positive change in your finances, remember, attitude is everything. If you waste energy on coulda, shoulda, woulda, or pity party, it takes your eyes off the prize and slows down your progress in the process. If you have a positive mental attitude, you will not only be able to embrace the new way of doing things and the many valuable lessons on the journey, but also you'll be able to effectively execute generational transfer.
Wow.
So that's page 54 in my book. So that's a bona fide bit to ponder. So, again, pick up a copy of my book for more such bona fide bits where inspiration and intellect collide with your finances.
Well, speaking of your book, let's let's offer an incentive to the listeners out there, should they be interested in purchasing a copy of the book, or some, because you have more than a book in your store. I'm going to call it your store. You have more than a book in your store. So what else is there, and how might they be able to access some of this stuff?
I also have a couple T-shirts, and actually my website is being revamped, so hopefully I'm actually going to launch it in the next couple days, actually, and so there'll be some other downloadable things as well.
Okay.
But currently there is the physical copy of the book and 2 T-shirts, and so if the listeners, by the end of the month, February 28th, if they purchase 2 items, it could be a bundle, meaning a book and a T-shirt, or 2 books or 2 T-shirts or what have you. They will also receive a $50 discount voucher on a one-on-one consultation. And if they purchase 1 item, i.e. a book or a T-shirt, they will get a $25 discount voucher on a one-on-one consultation. So, and those offers are good till the end of the month. So, nice little Valentine gift for that special someone in your life or for yourself. Opportunities to kind of get your finances in order for the rest of the year. And we can talk a little bit about, hopefully they're not getting a large tax refund. If they are, we'll talk about what to do with it and talk about how not to get a large tax refund next year, because that should never be the goal.
Wow. Well, that certainly is an interesting part, because I shouldn't say everyone, but most people want a large tax refund. So that's something that they feel that, hey, that is a good thing. That means that I've been managing my deductions right. I've done all of the things that allowed me to get a large refund. Maybe I've overpaid and stuff like that. So they would be wanting a large refund. And I'm hearing you say that might not be what you want. So in 30 seconds, why might that not be what we want?
Because they have not managed their deductions well. That means that they gave Uncle Sam, they overpaid Uncle Sam throughout the year. So Uncle Sam, when you're getting a refund, he's giving you your principal back, right?
Right.
But he drew the interest all year on your money. He's keeping the interest. He's just giving you the principal back. So if you had all of that yourself, you could have drawn the interest on that same money, and you could have invested that interest. You could have spent that interest. You could have done a lot with the interest, because the interest would have been on your side. So the goal is really to try to break even. Either you owe just a little bit, or you get back just a little bit, because you'll never hit the nail right on the head, typically speaking. But you want to minimize what you pay or what you receive, because when you're getting a large tax refund, just think about the interest that you would have gotten on that same amount of money if it was invested somewhere. Even if it was a nominal rate of return. So say it was 1% return on whatever that amount that you're getting back. Say it's $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. If your rate of return was 1%. But how about if it was 5%? That would have been your money. But now it's Uncle Sam's money, because he's just giving you the principal back. He's not giving you the interest.
He's not giving you the interest. He's saying, thank you very much. I appreciate you letting me use your money, just like insurance companies do. Well, Pamela, thank you so much for being here today.